saw the end of the defense's case. I saw the main witness on that they wanted to bring to the stand on the federal election issues, prevented from taking the stand because of the limiting orders that the judge wanted to put on him and prevent him from testifying about what federal election laws were. And then in the afternoon, I was in the front row and sat through the discussion on the jury instructions, the charge, and that's was fascinating. At the end of the day, I'm a former prosecutor, and I think when you wear the white hat, you do justice. You don't necessarily try to win cases. And I was very disappointed how Matthew Colangelo, a Biden administration official previously, and his co-counsels argued, to their own advantage, to the state's advantage, instead of just making sure that the trial was fair, that the law was accurate, that the jury wasn't confused. They tried to do quite the opposite. They tried to make it unfair. And of course, as I mentioned there in those comments on the street yesterday in New York City, this Judge Merchan, is highly conflicted. He clearly does not like Donald Trump and is trying to do everything to disadvantage him. And I think that's just inconsistent with our American principles of justice.
Really remarkable that this is where we've gotten to after, almost 7 weeks of trial. Matt, is it common for a judge to dismiss a jury and give them 8 days off before calling the jury back to the trial?
Yeah, this leisurely path that we're on, where we take Wednesdays off and a few Fridays here and there, and it's just like nothing I've ever seen. Usually when you have a jury and you're trying a case, you go Monday to Friday, from 9 to 5, and you kind of grind it out. And so, I think Judge Merchan understood by having this leisurely path that he can keep himself and this case in the news doing, what he thinks is political damage to President Trump. I think what's backfired is that this is making Donald Trump more popular, and it's giving him the platform that I saw yesterday, where President Trump was able to speak 3 times: once in the morning, once when we came back from lunch, and then once at the conclusion of the day. And so it gives him a platform to communicate what his thoughts on this. But remember, he has a significant gag order where, as he said yesterday, he can't say what he really wants to say. At some point in time when this trial's over, he will, but right now he's prevented from speaking.
How could this 8-day break ultimately affect the jury? Because 8 days removed from this, I have to think that some are going to forget key parts of this trial. I have to think that some are going to go on Memorial Day barbecues, talk with family and friends, even though they're not supposed to. They're all human. They're going to be walking around New York City. They're going to see things on the news. They're going to see things in newspapers. This could have a major impact on what the jury decides next week.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I've tried cases both as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer, and that's one of your biggest concerns, is that your jurors go and talk about this case or try to do their own research or look up information that's outside of the trial record. And I think human nature is always the thing we must remember. These are human beings, these are American citizens. They have reason and common sense, but they also, have, the same memories that we have, which is, as recency and primacy. So, the things, the nuances, maybe some of what, kind of the way that that witnesses testified is going to be lost. And then they're going to get in the jury room, and they're going to maybe forget key elements. Who or how that affects the jury and their deliberations will be interesting to watch and hear about in the past. But, for me, I think that this just does not seem like a fair trial, especially the way these jury instructions may come out and the way Judge Merchan just seems to, one of the fundamental things is he wants to use a civil standard, it appears, and the state argued for a civil standard on the federal election alleged violations. And that, to me, is just not only reversible error, it's outrageous that they would somehow use this civil standard for the jury to find President Trump potentially guilty.